We are back. The group stage of Fissure Playground 2 has just concluded. We are now ready to set the stage for the playoffs beginning on Friday. 16 teams have entered, 8 teams have gone home, and 8 teams remain fighting for that trophy. There's been drama and roster moves. The ongoing and enduring infinite hate watch to see if the Falcons will fall short yet again. And the mad dash by teams like G2, Furia, Mongolz, and even Aurora to capture a title while the big dogs are not in play. Which leaves us with a sense that this playoffs is very much up for grabs, so let's go ahead and break down how these teams got there, some of the teams who didn't make it, and maybe even do a little bit of cheeky playoff prediction at the end. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, you can show me by leaving a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Help me at 10k subs by the end of the year. Also, follow me on twitch.tv/LionHeartZ2. Help me reach 1,000 followers there as well. And lastly, before we get started, I would like to thank today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by SkinsMonkey, a CS2 trading website. You put in the skins that you want to trade, you select what you want, you use my code LionHeartZ for up to $5 off, or click the top link in the description, and boom, new drip.
Nice.
You can also use my code for a 35% deposit bonus if you want to buy with real money. And they have a free section with cool giveaways. So check the top link in the description, use my code to buy 15 Dragon Lores to let them know I sent you their way, and thank you to SkinsMonkey for sponsoring this video. Okay, kicking things off, let's talk about the Falcons first, as they were one of our 2 teams to exit in 3-0 fashion. They didn't lose a single map, they straight up dominated their way into the playoffs, which is pretty much exactly what you would want to see from this team at this point. Obviously, Falcons are a huge question mark right now. We're waiting to see what is the true level of this team with Kioske, Munisi, and Niko. They've had so many bad results, stunning losses that they shouldn't be giving up. And in a weakened field like this, they really shouldn't be satisfied with anything other than a finals appearance bare minimum. So I think it's a really good vote of confidence that they played so strongly in all of their matchups. I talked a lot more about their expectations in this tournament in a recent video before Fissure got started, and I'd like to say that they mostly met my criticisms head on and played beyond my expectations. In their opening matchup, they held Verse Pro to just 3 total rounds over both maps, absolutely dominant in that opening. Granted, Verse Pro are effectively a dead roster in my eyes, but still, you made it clean, you made it efficient. Kioske and Munisi were frying. Niko was not that great, but also not needed in terms of the overall firepower equation, and the calling from Kicksan and Zonic looked really sharp, so a great start. Their next matchup ended up being against Legacy, which is a little bit more of a close-knit affair. Inferno was not, with Falcons taking a very strong 13-4 lead. Zooming in on this for just a second, it's important to note that Inferno has changed quite a lot for Falcons on the CT side. Niko has given up his titular banana control in favor of Kioske and become an A anchor, which is a huge shift as Niko is quintessentially one of the best banana players in the history of the game, so him giving that space to the young new star rifler is a massive shift in philosophy. So far, it hasn't looked that great as Kioske didn't really do that well in the banana defense in this matchup, but he's a good enough player that this will improve over time, and this makes the A side hold for Falcons significantly stronger, with Niko able to use his phenomenal game sense to play around Munisi on the A side defense. It's an interesting change, but it's one that I think can work out in the long run. In the second map, it was much closer, with the game having to go to double overtime before Falcons could pull away with a 19-16 win. And once again, Niko was leading from the front, which is a really big deal. Niko has not had a whole lot of classic Niko performances in a while, and him carrying both games, the top frag, leader in the server, is a huge vote of confidence for Falcons going into a playoff environment. Really good to see him especially be great on the CT side. He went 19-8 in this game. The CT side has been really letting him down recently, and if Niko just gets back to something close to Niko form, then yeah, Falcons are the threat we all expected them to be. And in their 2-0 playoff qualification game, Falcons dusted off FaZe to finish off the flawless sweep 2-0. Now things went to the very last round on Nuke, but once again, you have to respect the fact that Niko stepped up when they needed it. He led the way from the front on both of these maps and had multiple pivotal multi-kill moments to get this game over the line. And then Falcons simply farmed FaZe on Dust 2. It was 13-6, not particularly close, and despite Jacob's best efforts, it was literally everyone on Falcons shooting straight. Munisi went 10-6 and wasn't even needed for their success. Every other player was in double digits, with Niko leading from the front once again with Kioske. Really, I struggle to find any flaws with how Falcons played in the group stage of Fissure. The question is, how will they hold up under playoff pressure, which has been one of their biggest demons as of late. If we get this form out of Niko, Kioske, and Munisi, then they should be the odds-on favorite to win this tournament alongside the Mongolz. They are easily the best team by firepower. If they can maintain the presence of that firepower, then I think they can deliver on that and make the deep run that we really all want to see from these players. Our other 3-0 team making it out in flawless fashion is Aurora, and compared to Falcons, they didn't exactly get by losing 0 maps. It was a lot more shaky at points, but the big through line is that Zontaras looks like he's back. He's really back to that smurfing in the group stage form that we all know and love. He's walking into the playoffs with a 1.3 rating over 7 maps, just behind Niko with a 1.35. He's looked very sharp in the server, huge multi-kill impact once again. And while Aurora, we know exactly what we're going to get in terms of the calling out of Major, if the firepower can really bounce back, then they can still be as dangerous as we all know and love. Now, Aurora did not get off to a clean start by any means. Their opening series against Astralis was an exercise in just some of the shittiest Counter-Strike I've seen in quite a while. Both teams making mistake after fucking mistake after fucking mistake. Shout out to Major because Aurora put up an absolutely fucking classically dreadful performance on Nuke T side, allowing Astralis to take the 1-0 lead 13-8. And then on Dust 2, Aurora had a 12-6 lead after a dominant 9-3 T half before they conceded 6 straight rounds to Astralis' T side into overtime. Thankfully, Aurora did not choke the series thereafter. They were really good in that overtime, but like, Jesus Christ, boys, can we just close out a fucking game, please? To their credit, I thought Aurora looked very strong to close on Overpass, with their big 3 rifles in Wicadia, Jota, and Zontares going absolutely sicko mode on the T side to an 8-4 first half lead. This time, they thankfully did not piss away on their second half CT defense. In their following series, they beat Tyloo in 2 games, both of them rather close, 13-10 on Inferno, 13-11 on Mirage. This really was a team effort, with all 4 of the players sans Major really putting up impact when they needed, with Wicadia and Woxic leading from the front in terms of overall fragging. This series had the potential to be much closer if Jamyang and G had not put up such pretty bad performances. If those guys are more closer to what we expect out of them, then this goes 3 maps minimum, and there's a world where Aurora can lose this. But overall, they managed to limit the impact of both of those players in such a way that it put Aurora in a good space to win to begin with, so really that's just a credit to them. And lastly, in their qualifying series in the upper bracket, Aurora dusted off Furia in 2-0 fashion in a very convincing series. It was 13-5 on Inferno, then 13-11 on Dust 2, and considering how much of the praise I've been singing for Furia for the last couple weeks, I do think this is actually a pretty shocking result. And what it really boils down to is Zontares just smurfed all over Furia. He was a monster on both maps, dropping 45 kills total, 20 on Inferno, 25 on Dust 2. He also looked at Yakindar in the opening kill matchup and said that's barbecue chicken, cornbread, and a side of collard greens, and was having himself a hell of a fucking feast. Really, the eternal question for Aurora, let's see what I did there, is will they hold up under playoff pressure? The eternal coin flip, did it again, will decide whether they stay on fire or not. Boom, rule of 3. My guess is they are probably going to flame out. Okay, I'll stop. Presumably in the semifinals, because their opening quarterfinal matches against Pain, and Pain have not looked that great recently, but who knows? It's Aurora in a playoff situation. They could just bomb out. Our next team making it through were the Mongolz, and I have to be upfront about this one. A lot of these games are happening like overnight for me and into the early morning. Pretty much all of the Mongolz games were happening at like 3 a.m. my time, so I did not get to catch them live. I'm mostly working off of highlights and HLTV stats, so I'll be a bit more brief here. Really, the big smudge on the Mongolz at this tournament so far is a loss in opening series to 3D Max. Now, 3D Max are just the kind of team that with the right amount of prep, especially first game of the tournament, they're liable to jump you. They are good enough on their T sides to just occasionally strike out and beat a much better team than them. So, with the very strong performances out of both Maka and Body, especially Maka on Nuke, they managed to jump the Mongolz in the first series and beat them in 3 games, winning on Inferno 13-10, then losing on Ancient 13-5, and then closing out off the back of that Maka performance that I just mentioned on Nuke 13-9. I really don't think the Mongolz made a whole lot of major mistakes here. They just got pounced in the first series of the tournament, and considering that they went on to just clean sweep the rest of their games all the way out, I'm just not going to hold this against them. They went on, they played Lin Vision the next day, they 2-0'd them. It was 13-11 on Dust 2, 13-6 on Ancient. Not much to be said here. Mazinho carried on Dust 2, Blitz carried on Ancient. We continued this streak of playing Asian teams as they played Tyloo the next day after that, and this one was a little bit closer, with Tyloo taking a great first game on Mirage 13-10, but then the Mongolz seemed in firm control on Overpass, and especially Ancient, winning 13-10 there and 13-7 respectively. Interestingly enough, Mizzino continues to be the best overall fragger for the Mongolz at this point in the tournament. 910 and Senzu haven't been bad, but they haven't been putting up their usual clip of numbers. It really has been Blitz, Techno, and Mizzino filling in the gaps to keep this team afloat in these victories. Which is, of course, the titular greatest strength of this Mongolz roster. The fact that Senzu and 910 aren't always required for victory is just a huge boon to their overall consistency. Thankfully, Senzu did come alive in their qualification series against FaZe, where he was pivotal on their map wins in a close 3-map affair. We start off on Mirage, where things went the distance, and it was culminated in a Mongolz win with Senzu ending on a multi-kill. He was fantastic throughout this entire game, ending with 21 kills, 12 deaths, and 1.74 rating. What really saved the Mongolz at the end was the difference in clutching. FaZe were on a huge run of form on the T side. They won 5 straight rounds after Mongolz got to match point. And in that final round, FaZe managed to take control of the A bomb site without losing a player. All they have to do is get the site control, win their trades, get the bomb down, and we're going to overtime. But it's Senzu and 910 on the rotate through CT do such great work, taking a triple kill on Senzu and a trade on 910 to be able to battle this back and end the game where they did. And considering that FaZe go on to win map 2, this could have been a 2-0 win for FaZe had they managed to convert this map here on Mirage. On Inferno, it was FaZe leading from the front for most of this game, with Brokey and Rain having an Unc-Still-Godic masterclass, but a late T-round rush from the Mongolz pushes into overtime, where FaZe managed to bounce back with their momentum once again to close out the game, winning 4 straight, 16-13. Senzu maintained his high level from Mirage, and Blitz in 910 also went really hard. It's just, again, every once in a while, Rain remembers when he was still really good at the game, and he just goes Super Saiyan on you, and there's nothing you can do but drown. Of course, in vintage FaZe fashion, it's never for 2 games in a row, as FaZe got mollywopped on Ancient 13-5, Mongolz won 7 straight T rounds to open up the game, Senzu, God mode, they're in the playoffs, the Mongolz. Another team also in the playoffs that I have very little to say about is G2, because G2 had pretty much an identical trajectory to the Mongolz. They dropped 1 game, the second one they played against Furia. Other than that, they were not bothered on their way into the playoffs. And even better, their first quarterfinal matchups is against the Mongolz, one of the few teams we have yet to see them play since their meteoric rise to the top. Anyways, backing up, G2 opened up their efforts at FISSURE, taking out Lin Vision in 2 games. They beat them 13-10 on Dust 2, 13-8 on Inferno. Maddies, Heavy God, you know them, you love them. They're simply just a better team than Lin Vision. Lin Vision are one of the worst teams in this field. No shock there. However, G2 did get their ass handed to them by Furia in their second match, as we already stated. A little bit of vengeance for Blast London here, as Furia were 9-day compared to their appearance last time, with Molodoit, Serato, Yekindar, take your pick, all having significantly better showings. And in that way, Furia started off by beating G2 on Inferno 13-7, a very dominant showing, and then Overpass was a close and affair, having to go into overtime, but Furia were yet again able to walk away with the win, 16-14. Not to be overly simplistic, but this really boils down to a lack of impact from Malbs, Maddies, and Heavy God. Usually you can just rely on those 3, but Serato was significantly better in this game. Yekindar really won the opening wars against Malbs. And then, of course, a classic Unc-Still-Godic performance out of Fallen, who finished on Overpass with 27 kills, 19 deaths, and 1.38 rating. This was definitely a satisfying win for Furia. I'm curious to see if these 2 might meet later on in the playoffs. It's certainly possible. Anyways, early morning LionHeartZ here to finish up this take. After dropping to Furia, G2 would cruise past Legacy in 2-0 fashion. It was 13-2 on Train, 13-7 on Ancient. This was Lotto, the lone warrior amongst a whole lot of mid. No other player got above a 0.9 rating compared to him, and G2, Sunpius carried, we are moving on. Their final map of the group stage was against Gamer Legion, which initially looked like it might be pretty interesting, as Gamer Legion caught them a little flat-footed on the opening map on Overpass, taking a surprise 13-5 victory. Heavy God, Sunpius, and Maddies all had terrible opening maps, and it seemed like Gamer Legion might be able to carry this momentum onwards, but they got absolutely bricked by G2's T-side on Ancient, where G2 opened up with a 10-2 starting half. They then won the second half pistol on CT, and the game was over before you could blink. We moved to Inferno for the closer, which was a lot closer, but G2 once again held early momentum with an 8-4 CT half, with Maddies leading the way, and despite Gamer Legion jumping out to a very early lead off the pistol round win in the second half, they failed to win very many gun rounds. They were really living and dying by their ability to win clutches, which they won 4 of in this game, but in those head-to-head rounds, G2 were clearly the better team, and despite a lacking Heavy God throughout this series, and again that lack of clutch winning, they were still able to close this out 13-10 and make it into the playoffs. Of course, the enduring question with G2 is, what is the limit? How far can they push this? Are they going to start getting scouted more, and will they hit a brick wall? They definitely had some slip-ups here, nowhere near as clean as Blast London, but they still look like a very scary team, so I'm curious to see how they do in the playoffs. Speaking of playoffs, we got Furia also looking sharp heading into those. They start off by beating Lolquid, obviously the tallest task in the world as we all know. In classic Lolquid fashion, they opened up by beating Furia very dominantly on Dust 2 and giving us a false sense of hope that they might be able to win a big series for fucking once, only to proceed to piss and shit themselves at the supreme moment on Inferno, allowing Furia to take a clutch 13-11 win heading into Train, which is one of Furia's best maps, where they rolled over Lolquid 13-7. I'll save the Lolquid whinging for later in the Lolquid section. Furia, however, they endured that Dust 2 loss, they took it on the chin and bounced back very strongly. A big through line is that Caserado is having one of his best tournaments in quite a while. He's been firmly the best player on Furia, which has been a toss-up between him and Molodoy at any given event, but he's been by far one of the best players overall, with a 1.23 rating over his time here in the group stage, and as a top 8 player. He was pivotal in this win against Lolquid, going 21-13 on Inferno with a 1.66 rating, and an even better 25-13 with a 1.76 on Train. And this feels like fully activated Caserado, where he's just one of the best round closers in the entire world. You're not going to expect him to pick up many huge multi-kills, but he's going to finish damn near every round you ask him of, and especially he's just going to be a pillar on the CT side holding his angles, especially on Train. He's just so dominant out there. As per usual, Furia just have this intoxicating mix of super aggressive players in Molodoy and Yakindar. Yuri can get activated there as well, and then Fallen and Caserado are just endlessly clutch, which makes the team so dynamic and fun to watch. They beat G2 in the following series, we just talked about that, so I'll skip past it. They lost to Aurora, which we covered earlier in the video, and listen, that was just Zontara smurfing. Like I said, not a big deal to lose that kind of game when Zontara is playing that thermonuclear. They bounced back and beat Pain to qualify in, and they did so in more typically dominant fashion, winning on Inferno 13-4, one of the best Inferno teams in the world right now, it feels like, and then 13-10 on Dust 2. This was Caserado's worst series of the group stage, but it didn't matter because right at the front was Molodoy and especially Yuri, both of them having fantastic series on both maps. Looking ahead to the playoffs, Furia have a pretty interesting opening matchup against Astralis, a team they should be able to beat, but you never know, Astralis can catch you flat-footed sometimes. If they beat them, they're most likely playing Falcons in the semifinals, which will be a very difficult task, but Furia have already done it before. They've cucked the Falcons in the past. Maybe they could do it again, which would be quite hilarious. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, we're at the home stretch now. Let's talk about Astralis, who scraped through 3-2 out of the groups into a playoff position. Again, being fully transparent, most of these Astralis games happened while I was doing big sleepington, big nappy time. Basically, right now, I'm recording this at 5:30 in the morning because I'm a fucking psycho, and that's normally when I would be sleeping. Shocker. And that's when these Astralis games were happening. Anyways, this is the first outing with Magisk back in the lineup, which is a roster move I actually don't think I got to talk about what had happened. But yeah, Stown is gone, Magisk is in. I feel like the goal is that Hooksy should be grooming Magisk into the next IGL, but who knows. Anyways, the whole point is that Magisk comes in, he takes a lot of the anchor spots that Stair was playing, and Astralis can fully activate Stair into more of a star role, which so far he's actually excelled in. Him and Device were the best players for Astralis, multiple series here where Stair was actually hard carrying. Magisk was just kind of okay. Overall, I feel like this was a lateral move for Astralis because Magisk is not going to move the needle too much in terms of overall fragging power, but Stown was such a liability in big game matchups that maybe makes a difference in the long run. Regardless, Stair to star roles should be a good move long term. We'll just have to wait and see. They started off their campaign getting dusted by Aurora in 3 games, as we talked about earlier. They followed that up with a nice 2-0 win against Virtus Pro, 13-7 on Ancient, then 13-11 on Train. Right out the gate, Stair best player in the server, 44-24 across both maps, 1.66 rating. Device had a very bad start to the tournament, which looked to be a bad sign at the time, but he recovers his form in later on series, so I guess that's not that big of a deal. Hooksy was actually doing some good work as well. He was the second best player for Astralis, which is normally a bad thing, but Virtus Pro are so fucking bad that it didn't matter. However, it was one step back, one step forward, and one step back again, as in the next day, Astralis would get 2-0'd by Pain. A 13-5 stomp on Mirage, and a very close fought affair on Inferno would end with Pain getting the win 16-14. On Mirage, nobody other than Device could get anything going. Device was the only player to get double-digit kills, a positive rating, the only one to even be remotely acceptable. Everybody else was downright terrible. Things were definitely better on Inferno, though Astralis really struggled on their T side here, only winning 3 rounds in the first half. There's definitely a second half comeback that propelled us into overtime, but some clutch plays from DGT, who led from the front for the whole series, was the difference maker for Pain to finish things off and get the 2-0 sweep. But it's alright, Astralis got their vengeance against Brazil the next day. They beat Legacy very soundly, eliminating them from the events. It was 13-8 on both maps, with Stair and Device top fragging on both of them. It really feels like Astralis didn't have to struggle too much, as Legacy really lacked a lot of that pop, a lot of that just ferocity that we've expected from them, given what they were able to do in Austin just a few short months ago. And with one more 2-0 sweep over Gamer Legion, Astralis have found themselves a playoff spot. They beat Gamer Legion 13-9 on Overpass and then 13-10 on Nuke. Gamer Legion put up a damn good fight, despite them also being one of the teams operating a dead roster here, as they were also forced to announce because of EPL that Hypex is stepping up in place of Kersey as soon as this event is over. So you have the dead roster buff or nerf, depending on how you look at it, on their side. And with all of that, they were one game short of making the playoffs here. But Astralis, they were just a little more consistent, a little bit more impact out of their stars. PR did not have a very good tournament. So given all those circumstances, bowing out to Astralis here is just not that big of a deal in my opinion. The question is, can Astralis do anything in the playoffs? I don't think so. They got Furia in that opening matchup, and that just seems like, unless Furia really underperform, I wouldn't expect Astralis to be able to take that victory. And even if they do, they're staring down the barrel of Falcons in the semifinals, which just feels like they're losing regardless. Okay, our second to last team to qualify were Pain Gaming. I'm just going to zip through this one because we have a lot to talk about with Liquid and the video is getting pretty long. Pain had kind of an up and down performance here. They feel like a safe bet for one of the weakest teams in the playoffs. Their opening round quarterfinals is against the Falcons, so I'm not going to give this too much time. They started off FISSURE by losing 0-2 to FaZe. They bounced back with an incredibly long 2-1 series against Heroic, where the final map Nuke went to triple overtime. All 3 maps were very close, a very exciting, fun game. I'd highly recommend going back and watching the highlights, but Pain walked away with the victory in the end. They then beat Astralis 2-0, they lost to Furia 2-0, and then beat Virtus.pro 2-1 to make it through. All in all, I feel like this is what we would expect out of Pain at this point. They lost to teams that I would consider more or less better. FaZe, for all their issues, I would say are better than Pain. And then Furia are definitely better. Astralis, it's close. Heroic, I would say they're better than. Virtus.pro, they're definitely better than. So it all just kind of makes sense for me. DGT and NQZ were pretty good throughout the entirety of the group stage. Zyro had one of his better group stages in a little while, but then Davideus and Snow were just kind of middling to honestly bad in a lot of series, so it feels like the firepower for Pain isn't really showing up in a way that you would want. You'd want to see more impact on Davideus for Snow to start taking that step forward, but once again, this team just ends up being so inconsistent, despite them being a team that I have projected very good things about in the past. I'm not really sure what to rate them in this current moment. It feels like they're just kind of in flux, with Big Zyro's calling not being as good as it was a year ago, the fragging being super inconsistent, and QZ tends to be their best player overall. They're just a hard team for me to really put a finger on and what to expect out of them. They can just break out and make a major playoffs at Austin like they did, or they can just bomb out of a group stage like they've done several times this year. They're just a very, very hard team to rate. And like I said at the beginning of this section, if they had any other first round opponent other than the Falcons, maybe I could entertain them making a semifinals run here, but I think they're going to get run over unless something utterly hilarious happens on Friday. And that just leaves Team Liquid, who at the start of this event looked turbo over, and when it was announced midway through that Twist is leaving for FaZe at the end of FISSURE Playground regardless, it felt even more over than it could possibly be. They lost their opening series to Furia in tragic fashion, as I already talked about. They got 2-0'd by Gamer Legion, which felt like the death nail. And then they turn around, they beat Heroic in a 3-map series, really close. They beat Tyloo in a 3-map series, which also felt very close. Then they 2-0'd FaZe in the final game to make it into the playoffs, which on one hand offers up a huge conflict of interest discussion, which I don't really think is within the scope of this video, but also two, might actually fuck over both teams in the long run, which is kind of what I want to talk about. This is less about the results and more about the minutia of the major going forward into Budapest, because it was pointed out by M&M's over on Twitter and then corroborated by another guy, Mischief, who is one of those people who has a really good understanding of the VRS, knows a lot about the rules. He's also a very good stats and data analyst, so shout out to him for that commentary. But basically, this move for Twist going to FaZe could accidentally rebound to hurt both teams in the sense that Liquid might not be able to play enough games before the cutoff for the Budapest roster lock to be able to qualify their new roster. Because, as Valve have tried to change and prevent people from just, swapping out roster spots willy-nilly to affect their regional placements, when you make a roster change, you don't automatically update this team's standings within the VRS. The VRS, until enough matches are played, still reflects the older lineup. So Liquid would have to play around 5 matches after the end of FISSURE with their new 5th to be able to qualify that as their lineup going into the roster lock, which pretty much means we're running out of time because the Budapest roster lock is on October 7th, and right now there is a rumor floating around that Liquid are going to try to attend a Philadelphia event before that roster lock, and if they don't play 5 games in that event, which isn't guaranteed, then this could just fuck over both Liquid and FaZe, as Twist would no longer qualify to play for FaZe, and Liquid would no longer be able to play with their new 5th, who of course is not announced yet. So my understanding is that it's kind of bad that Liquid wins here against FaZe, because this gives them a lot less time to prep with their new team, whatever that might be, go to Philadelphia and put up the best possible competition they can there, or try and squeeze in another tournament in between or whatever to meet this game's requirement for the roster cutoff date. So we might be walking into a just huge clusterfuck where both teams are torpedoed and FaZe have to either bring back whoever they drop for Twist and vice versa for Liquid. And, this really downplays the fact that Liquid actually shot up the VRS substantially and might actually make the Budapest major now. It is an incredibly odd and ongoing situation, and I wanted to highlight that here because it's a huge narrative going into the playoffs for this event, as Liquid could go on and do something here in FISSURE Playground, maybe make a deep playoff run, climb up the VRS further, and further cement themselves as being able to make the major, but it'd all be for naught if they can't actually play with the lineup they are wanting to going into it. All of this just gives the feeling of this being so weird because I want to celebrate Team Liquid for making the playoffs because obviously we don't get many of those nowadays, but it's just this whole situation with the roster move in the middle of the event, it's so odd, and it's a byproduct of just how jam-packed the schedule is and the way that roster cutoffs work, that these teams were forced to announce these moves ahead of time, when in reality they probably would have just waited till after the event and wouldn't have made things feel as weird as they did. But with EPL on the horizon, they had to announce it so that everything was above board, so we knew about conflict of interest going in, and all I want to do is just watch Counter-Strike, man. Anyways, let's rapid fire some playoff predictions. I'm just going to do the quarterfinals. I don't want to speculate too far. All right, our opening quarterfinals, we have G2 versus the Mongolz. I'm going to take G2 to win that 3 games. I'm predicting a Mongolz slump performance, and I'm buying G2 stock while it's high. We'll see if I get burned. Aurora versus Team Liquid. I'm going to bet on the Zontaras Masterclass and Liquid running out of gas here. I'm going to take Aurora to win that. And you know what? I'll say 2 games, 2-0. Furia versus Astralis. I'm expecting a 2-0 sweep for Furia. They're going on. Falcons versus Pain. I'm also projecting a 2-0 win for them. And we'll see what happens after that. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, you should be leaving a like, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Help me take kisses by the end of the year. Follow me on Twitch, LionHeartZ, how many 1,000 followers over there. Thank you to kids, make a response review. Check top places, go turn their website, listen to us, send you their way. Thank you to our channel members, Justin, Jesse, Furley, Milan Berta, Bubblesj, Dr. Cocktor, Patatas Kaftesi, PTR, B1 Games, Cody Foxworthy, Justin Vandervate, I'm Flashbang, Snow Me White, Rowdy, LBKcs, Snax Enjoyer, Crunchy Water, zerotwocs, drudenae, chron, Gano, Zyro, Devvrat Singh, and Clyde Mead. If you want to become a channel member, you can do so at the link in the description down below. For $5 a month, you can support me directly and get your name at the end of the video just like this, as well as a custom role in our community Discord. I'll see you guys later. Bye.